Amelia Earhart. That name, it just sparks instant recognition, doesn't it?
It really does. Images of flight adventure.
Exactly.
Right.
Open cockpits, daring feats. She was more than just a pilot. She was, well, a true icon.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about it. Only the second person ever to fly solo across the Atlantic.
And the first woman to fly solo, nonstop, clear across the United States. That's huge.
Huge. And beyond the flying, she was this vocal champion for women, right? And wrote these really popular books about her experiences.
Shared her adventures widely.
Yet all these incredible things she did, they often get viewed through the lens of, well, that one central enduring question, what happened to her?
That's right. What happened on that final attempt to fly around the world?
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to dig into today in this deep dive. We'll look closely at what we actually know about that final flight.
Using historical records and things?
Exactly. Historical records, archived materials, and we'll even touch on some of the more recent findings and expeditions, trying to piece together this really compelling story.
Okay, so to understand the end, maybe we should start at the beginning. Lay the groundwork.
Good idea. Let's go back.
She was born July 24th, 1897, Atchison, Kansas. And apparently, even as a kid, she seemed, I don't know, determined to do her own thing.
Yeah, there are stories about her childhood, that scrapbook she kept, filled with clippings about accomplished women, engineers, lawyers, film directors.
Wow, so not just actresses or singers.
No, women who achieved in traditionally male fields. And later, she took an auto repair course.
An auto repair course, back then.
Right. Hardly typical for a young woman in that era. She did some college too, but never finished her degree.
Those details, like the scrapbook and the auto repair, they really paint a picture, don't they, of this inherent independence.
They really do. That scrapbook, it wasn't just a hobby. It suggests she was actively looking for role models, internalizing these examples of what women could achieve. And the auto repair thing, in a field so dominated by men, it just signals this fundamental desire to challenge those norms.
It feels like it set the stage for challenging aviation boundaries later.
I think so. That early sort of defiance, it wasn't just being quirky, it laid the foundation.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. 1918, Toronto. She's a nurse's aide during World War I.
Right, with the Red Cross. And that's where she sees her first flying exhibition.
But she doesn't actually fly in a plane until 1920 in California, right? With Frank Oz.
That's the story. And apparently that first flight was it. Completely transformative. She was hooked instantly.
Yeah, she famously said something like, as soon as I left the ground, I knew I myself had to fly.
Exactly. That says it all. So after that, she starts taking lessons. Her instructor was Anita Snook, often called Nita Snook.
Nita Snook. And the plane was a Curtiss Jenny.
Yeah, a popular WWI surplus biplane. A common trainer back then. But getting those lessons wasn't easy.
Right, she had to work for it.
Definitely. Worked as a telephone clerk, even a photographer, just scraping together the money for flight time.
Talk about serious dedication. I mean, really wanting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it paid off. She soloed in 1921.
And then bought her own plane pretty quickly after, a Kinner Airster.
That's right, a bright yellow one she nicknamed the Canary. And by 1923, she officially becomes the 16th woman in the world to get a pilot's license.
Only the 16th. That's amazing. But get this, even before she got the official license, back in 1922, she'd already set a women's altitude record.
14,000 feet.
Wow. Before even being licensed.
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about her natural ability, her daring. It wasn't just about the piece of paper. It was about pushing limits from the get-go.
Okay, so she's licensed. She's already breaking records. Now we get to the part where she really starts capturing the world's attention.
The late 1920s.
June 1928. She's a passenger on a transatlantic flight, Newfoundland to Wales.
With pilots Wilmer Stoltz and Lou Gordon. It made her famous overnight. The first woman to cross the Atlantic by air.
But she wasn't actually flying it, right? She later said she felt like baggage.
Yes, that famous quote. Apparently, she'd hoped to take the controls for part of it, but it didn't happen on that 20-plus hour flight.
So even though that flight made her famous, it also seems like it lit a fire under her. Like, okay, now I have to do it myself.
Exactly. That feeling of being, well, a passive observer, despite the historic nature of the trip, seems to have been a huge motivator.
She needed to be in control.
It speaks to that drive for autonomy, for recognition based on her own skills, not just being associated with something.
Right. Okay, so fast forward to May 1932. This is the big one.
The solo Atlantic crossing.
First woman, second person after Lindbergh, solo, nonstop, Newfoundland to Northern Ireland in her Lockheed Vega 5B.
And it was anything but easy.
Oh man, the accounts are harrowing. Extreme fatigue, a leaky fuel tank,
A cracked manifold spitting flames.
flames, and ice building up on the wings, forcing her down low over the ocean.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. She ended up landing unexpectedly in a pasture near Londonderry, Northern Ireland.
Not quite Paris like Lindbergh.
No, but incredible nonetheless.
Yeah.
It really proved her skills as a pilot and her just sheer resilience, overcoming mechanical failures, terrible weather.
It cemented her place, didn't it? As a true pioneer.
No question.
Yeah.
And the world reacted accordingly.
Yeah, huge celebrations in Europe, then a massive ticker tape parade in New York City. International sensation.
But she didn't just rest on that achievement.
No way. Just a few months later, August 1932, she does another first.
The solo, non-stop flight across the U.S. by a woman.
Los Angeles to Newark, New Jersey. And she set records doing it, too, for speed and distance for women.
19 hours and 5 minutes, I think? Over 2,400 miles.
Just relentless. These back-to-back achievements really solidified her image, right? Fearless, accomplished.
Definitely. It showed her endurance, her navigation skills over long distances. It wasn't just a one-off Atlantic stunt.
And she kept going. January 1935, another major first.
The Hawaii to U.S. mainland flight, first person to fly that route solo.
In another Lockheed Vega, the 5C model this time, Oakland, California was the destination.
That was a particularly risky one, that huge expanse of the Pacific, navigating to the mainland.
And she saw it as more than just a personal record, didn't she? Like paving the way for future air service.
Yes, she mentioned that. Contributing to the possibility of future commercial flights over the Pacific shows her forward thinking about aviation's potential.
The list just keeps going, though. There were speed records.
Feminine speed records in 29 and 30.
And she was the first woman to fly an autogyro.
Yes, and set an altitude record in 1931, those early rotary wing aircraft.
And then speed records, Mexico City to D.C., Mexico City to Newark.
All in 1935. She was incredibly active, flying different types of planes, different kinds of routes, versatile.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about long distances. It was speed, altitude, different technologies.
A true powerhouse in aviation.
Yeah.
But her impact went beyond her own cockpit.
Right. She was a huge supporter of other women pilots.
Very much so.
She competed in the 1929 All-Women's Air Derby, the first big transcontinental air race for women, came in third.
And she helped organize it. That race, sometimes called the Powder Puff Derby, was a big deal in proving women could handle demanding competitive flying.
Her being involved in organizing and competing, placing well, that says a lot.
It shows her leadership, her commitment, and that led directly to co-founding the 99s.
Ah, yes. The Organization for Women Pilots. Still around today.
Still very active. She was its first president. The goal was to create a network, support each other, recruit more women into flying, find opportunities.
A lasting legacy right there.
Definitely. Her vision for that community was powerful.
Now, with all this fame, she needed management, right? That's where George Putnam comes in.
Yes, George P. Putnam, the publisher. Yeah. He became her manager after the 1928 transatlantic flight, and later her husband.
And he helped shape her public image.
Very effectively. She became a popular lecturer, wrote those books 20H's 40 Minute, The Fun of It, and Last Flight, which came out after she disappeared.
She was even aviation editor at Cosmopolitan magazine.
She was. Putnam helped leverage her fame. Her writing and speaking weren't just about her adventures. They popularized aviation generally and inspired so many people, especially women.
And she even branched out into, like, fashion design.
Well, functional clothing and luggage. A line designed for active women. It shows another side of her practical, modern.
Multifaceted is definitely the word. Okay, so all this builds up to the ultimate challenge.
The round-the-world flight. The goal was to circumnavigate the globe, staying as close to the equator as possible, about 29,000 miles.
A truly massive undertaking, and a first attempt didn't go well.
No, that was in March 1937. They planned to fly westbound, starting from Oakland. But on takeoff from Honolulu, Hawaii, for the next leg...
A crash.
Yes, a ground loop. The landing gear collapsed. The plane was badly damaged. Fortunately, no serious injuries.
That must have been a huge setback, mentally, financially.
Oh, undoubtedly. The Lockheed Electra needed extensive repairs. But her determination was incredible. She was committed to trying again.
So the plane gets shipped back to California for repairs, and they decide to try again, but flying eastbound this time.
Correct. The second attempt began June 1st, 1937. Started from Oakland again, but flew first to Miami.
And that's where her navigator, Fred Noonan, joined her.
Yes, Fred Noonan, a very experienced navigator, particularly with Pan Am's trans-Pacific clipper routes. His expertise was considered crucial for the long overwater legs.
So from Miami, they head east across the Atlantic, Africa, India, Southeast Asia.
Making numerous stops along the way. And by June 29th, they'd reached Leh in New Guinea.
That's incredible progress. How far had they flown by then?
About 22,000 miles, a huge chunk of the journey completed.
Wow, so they had roughly 7,000 miles left to get back to Oakland.
Roughly, yes. But the remaining Pacific leg was arguably the most challenging, particularly the next step.
Which was the flight to Howland Island.
Exactly. Departed Leh on July 2nd, 1937, heading for Howland Island. It was meant to be a crucial refueling stop.
And Howland is tiny, right?
Incredibly tiny. Just a mile and a half long, maybe half a mile wide. A flat speck of coral in the middle of the vast Pacific.
And how far was it from Leh?
About 2,556 miles. A very long flight over open ocean to find a minuscule target. Navigation had to be perfect.
This is where things started to go wrong, particularly with communication.
Yes. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed off Howland Island specifically to help them, provide radio direction finding signals, maintain contact.
But they had trouble talking to each other.
Significant trouble. Establishing clear, two-way radio contact proved extremely difficult. The Itasca could hear Earhart's voice transmissions sometimes, but apparently Earhart couldn't hear the Itasca's signals well, or perhaps at all, for much of the approach.
And there was the Morse code issue.
That was another factor. Neither Earhart nor Noonan were proficient in Morse code. The Electra had Morse capability, but they relied primarily on voice radio.
Why was Morse code so important there?
Well, Morse code signals, the dits and das, can often cut through atmospheric static and interference, much better than voice transmissions over long distances.
Yeah.
And the Itasca was trying to send Morse signals for direction finding.
Ah, okay. So if they couldn't use Morse effectively, that was a big disadvantage.
A significant one, yeah. Given the meticulous planning elsewhere, it's a point historians often debate why Morse proficiency wasn't prioritized more for this specific leg.
Maybe they thought the voice radio would be enough. Or focused more on the celestial navigation.
Perhaps. Hard to say definitively, but it certainly complicated things.
Despite the problems, the Itasca did hear from her as they got closer.
Yes, they received several voice messages. The signal strength indicated she was getting near Howland.
And then the last kind of chilling confirmed message at 8:43 in the morning, local time.
Right. She radioed. We are on the line of position 157337. Wait, correction, it was 156137. I believe in some accounts the numbers vary slightly, but the meaning is similar. We'll repeat message. We will repeat this message on 210 kilocycles. Wait, listening on 610 kilocycles.
Trying to switch frequencies to make contact?
Yes. And then shortly after, we are running north and south.
What does that mean, running north and south?
It implies they believe they were very close to Howland's latitude. Along that line of position, derived from a celestial sighting, likely a sun line, but they couldn't see the island. So they were flying north and south along that line, searching visually.
Searching for that tiny speck of land.
Exactly. There were other, weaker transmissions heard after that, some suggesting low fuel, but nothing clear or confirming their position.
And they never found it.
They never found Howland Island. The Itasca crew saw the sunrise, scanned the horizon, listened intently, but there was nothing more definitive.
A massive search followed, right? Navy ships, aircraft.
One of the largest and most expensive air and sea searches in history up to that point. They searched for over 2 weeks.
But found absolutely nothing.
No trace of the Electra, no debris, nothing.
So on July 19th, 1937, they were officially declared lost at sea.
Correct. And that's where the known facts essentially end. And the decades of speculation, theories, and investigation really begin.
Yeah, because the lack of any wreckage is, well, it leaves the door wide open, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It has fueled endless fascination and numerous theories trying to explain what happened.
Okay, let's talk about those theories. The main official one is the crash and sink idea, right?
That's the most widely accepted explanation by many aviation historians and the U.S. government. The basic idea is that they simply ran out of fuel.
Due to, what, navigational errors?
Likely a combination of factors. Possible navigational errors. Remember, finding Howland was incredibly difficult. Maybe less favorable winds than expected, using more fuel. Cloudy weather obscuring celestial navigation sites or hiding the island. The radio problems preventing them from getting good directional bearings from the Itasca.
So basically, they missed the island, ran out of gas, and had to ditch the plane in the ocean.
That's the essence of the theory. The plane sank, likely in very deep water, making recovery virtually impossible. especially back then.
But the main sticking point is still no wreckage ever found, despite searches, even recent ones with better tech.
Exactly. The Pacific is vast and incredibly deep in that region. Finding anything would be extremely difficult. But the complete lack of any confirmed debris keeps doubts alive for some.
Which leads to other theories, like the Nikumaro hypothesis.
Right. This one has gained significant attention, largely thanks to the work of TIGR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery.
What's the idea there?
The theory is that Earhart and Noonan, unable to find Howland and low on fuel, might have spotted Nikumaro. It's an uninhabited coral atoll, formerly known as Gardner Island, about 350 nautical miles southeast of Howland.
So they could have potentially landed there?
The theory suggests they could have made an emergency landing on the island's flat coral reef during low tide, maybe survived for a time as castaways.
And is there any evidence to support this?
Gigar points to several pieces of circumstantial evidence found on Nikumaro over the years. There were skeletal remains found by a British colonial administrator in 1940.
Human remains.
Yes. They were initially assessed at the time as likely male, but the bones themselves were later lost. However, Tigger commissioned forensic anthropologists to reanalyze the original measurement notes.
Yeah.
A study, published relatively recently, suggested the bone measurements were more consistent with a female of Earhart's height and build than with the original assessment, though it's not definitive proof without the bones themselves for DNA.
Interesting. What else?
Various artifacts dating roughly to the 1930s have been found. Fragments of what might be a woman's shoe, part of a glass cosmetics jar consistent with the brand Earhart used, a small metal cosmetic compact,
Sounds intriguing.
and a piece of aluminum aircraft debris found on the island decades ago that some researchers believe could be a patch applied to Earhart's Electra during its repair in Miami.
But nothing absolutely conclusive, no made by Lockheed stamp or anything.
No definitive link has been established for any of these items. The aluminum piece is still debated. And crucially, multiple underwater searches around Nikumaro, including a high-profile one by Robert Ballard in 2019.
The guy who found the Titanic.
That's him. His expedition used state-of-the-art equipment, but found no conclusive evidence of the Electra wreckage in the surrounding waters.
So Nikumaro is plausible, maybe, but still unproven.
That's a fair summary. Intriguing clues, but no smoking gun.
Okay, what about the theories involving the Japanese? The capture or spy theory?
Yes.
Yeah.
This one suggests Earhart and Noonan didn't crash near Howland or land on Nikumaro, but instead flew much farther west, perhaps accidentally or intentionally, and ended up in the Marshall Islands.
Which were controlled by Japan at the time.
Correct. Japan controlled much of Micronesia under a League of Nations mandate, and the area was heavily militarized and largely closed off to outsiders. The theory posits they landed or crashed there and were captured by Japanese forces.
Maybe suspected of being spies?
That's often part of the narrative, that the round-the-world flight was perhaps partially a cover for U.S. reconnaissance of Japanese installations in the Pacific.
Is there any hard evidence for this?
Again, no solid proof. There have been some anecdotal accounts over the decades from Marshall Islanders claiming to have seen a plane crash or white captives around that time, but these are often inconsistent or unverifiable.
What about official records?
Extensive searches of Japanese and Allied wartime and post-war records have found no credible documentation of Earhart or Noonan being captured or held prisoner, and photographic evidence that emerged a few years ago supposedly showing them in Japanese custody.
I remember that. It caused a stir.
It did, but it was certainly quickly debunked. Researchers showed the photo was taken before 1937 and depicted different individuals.
So the capture theory remains largely speculative.
Highly speculative, lacking verifiable evidence.
Then there's the really out there one, that she faked her death and came back under a different name.
Yes, the Irene Bolam theory. This conspiracy theory suggests that Earhart survived, somehow returned secretly to the U.S., and lived out her life as a New Jersey housewife named Irene Bolam.
How did that even start?
It was promoted in a book in the 1970s based on supposed physical resemblances and circumstantial claims, but it's been thoroughly discredited.
Did Irene Bolam herself say anything?
Oh, yes. She vehemently denied it, was deeply distressed by the accusations, and even sued the book's publisher. The book was eventually withdrawn. There's simply no credible evidence to support it.
Okay, so that one's pretty much debunked. More recently, there was that sonar image, right? That looked like a plane.
The Deep Sea Vision sonar image from early 2024. Yes, that generated a lot of excitement. A private exploration company scanning the seabed near Howland Island captured a fuzzy sonar image that, well, it looked vaguely plane-shaped.
And it was in roughly the right area.
It was within about 100 miles of Howland, in very deep water. The possibility that it could finally be the Electra wreckage was tantalizing.
But
But further analysis by experienced deep-sea imaging experts and oceanographers concluded pretty definitively that the sonar anomaly was consistent with natural geological features, basically, an unusually shaped rock formation on the seabed.
okay. So another hopeful lead that didn't pan out.
Unfortunately, yes. It highlights how challenging it is to interpret sonar data in those extreme depths, and how easily hope can arise, only to be dashed by more rigorous scrutiny.
So after all this time, all the searches, all the theories, we're still left with the mystery.
Fundamentally, yes. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan remains unsolved. But what isn't a mystery is her incredible legacy.
Absolutely. Regardless of how her life ended, what she accomplished is undeniable. She's still such an enduring inspiration, isn't she? Especially for women.
Absolutely. She broke barriers not just in aviation, but in society. She became this powerful symbol of courage, of ambition, of refusing to accept limits based on gender.
Her achievements resonated way beyond just flying, a role model for anyone daring to try something difficult.
It's true. And in a strange way, the enduring mystery of her disappearance has perhaps only added to her legendary status.
That's an interesting point. It's a paradox almost. The mystery sometimes overshadows her life's work, but it also keeps her name alive, keeps people fascinated.
It does. We still celebrate Amelia Earhart Day on her birthday, July 24th. Her story continues to captivate.
And people are still looking, right? Exploration teams haven't given up hope of finding definitive answers.
No, the search continues. The desire for closure, for solving one of the 20th century's greatest aviation mysteries, is still very strong. Her story really pushes us to think about exploration, risk, and the drive to push boundaries.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the final chapter of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan's story is still unwritten.
Sadly, yes. We've looked at the facts, the flight, the theories, but the ultimate answer remains elusive.
But her impact, her spirit of adventure, her determination that's crystal clear and continues to inspire.
Undeniably. So maybe the final thought for you listening is, what part of Amelia's story resonates most strongly with you? And looking ahead, what might future technology finally reveal about those last moments on her final flight?
A compelling thought to end on. The mystery endures, but so does the inspiration.